And is Mr. Katz here? Okay. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before your prestigious committee today. As you know, some of you may know that I've been a long-time opponent of same-sex marriage. And to this point today, I still strongly object to the notion of this committee trying to change a social structure that has been in existence for over 3,000 years. While I recognize that there are people who are gay and lesbian and they need to be protected, we have enough laws on the Connecticut books and the federal books that recognize these protections. In 2005, this same committee, without a referendum, instituted civil unions to everyone within the state of Connecticut. We, as the people, were told that this would solve the alleged inequality rights that homosexuals were complaining about. Today, this committee is now attempting to redefine the definition of marriage. And for that, I strongly object and say this committee is so confident that same-sex marriage will not have a negative impact on the residents of the state of Connecticut and the United States of America. Why would you not consider to let the people of Connecticut decide this very moral and emotional public policy? I might also mention the fact of the distortions that the gay and lesbian communities are bringing to the forefront. We have heard that same-sex marriage is a civil right, and that those who oppose same-sex marriage are hate mongers, bigots, and not open-minded. However, this is not true. Many of the people who oppose same-sex marriage, such as those in the African American community, are appalled by the gay and lesbian, that gays and lesbians are using this as a civil right. Allegation in comparison to what has happened to the African Americans during the slavery times, post-Civil War, and during the 1960s, and even into today. I would like to ask this committee to tell me where is it posted that there is a heterosexual bathroom only? Where is it posted that there's a heterosexual water fountain only? Where is it posted that there's heterosexual seating on a bus? The fact of the matter is that none of this exists, and that this small minority of Americans are trying to force their way of living on those people who are just trying to get by. Government should never be involved in our bedrooms, and I truly believe in that. Government should never tell me that I have to accept something that's morally against my religious beliefs. I would encourage every member of this Judiciary Committee to look into the true facts of why same-sex marriage as a public policy for the state of Connecticut is wrong, and that the state of Connecticut should stay out of the extreme public policy changes and defend what Governor Rell said she would do, and recognize that the state of Connecticut recognizes a marriage between a man and a woman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Lawler.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Just out of curiosity, do you think we should repeal the civil unions law from 2 years ago?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that one. And just a couple of factual things. You said that this committee established civil unions, right? You understand that we didn't do it, we recommended it, but both houses of the legislature overwhelmingly did it, and the governor signed it. You understand how that works?
I understand that, Mr. Lowell, but you also pushed it. So.
No, I totally pushed it. I just want to say we don't get to decide these things here.
I understand that, sir.
All right. And I think you said that if we forced it on everybody in the state, we didn't require everybody to get a civil union. You understand that, right?
Well, no, I understand that, but you imposed the law on the people without a referendum. And I'm saying a referendum would be very good so that people have a choice in the matter. This is a public policy.
And I know you're aware that all of us have to stand for election every 2 years, and we all explain the way we think, and we get elected based on that. You understand how that works?
That is correct, too.
All right.
You and I have gone head-to-head twice.
We have.
Mm-hmm.
And the final thing is, you understand all the laws that get enacted by the legislature and signed by the governor, they're all passed without a referendum. You understand how that works?
I understand that clearly.
Okay, once.
I clearly understand that.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Senator Gomes.
You mentioned all those heterosexual signs and everything. Well, you know why they don't exist? Because civil rights, long ago, a lot of people of color suffered those same inequities, and they don't exist because of the civil rights laws that were passed. It doesn't only say blacks or coloreds or anything. They don't have those signs anymore. And you want to know something else? There was no referendum on them. It was passed by the federal government.
I understand that too, sir.
All right, thank you.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
What I'm saying to you, and I'm saying to this Judiciary Committee, is that there is no, that I have seen, and I know, there are no active federal programs or laws that are discriminating against gays and lesbians. There are none. So my point to you is, why do we need to change the social structure for this group of individuals?
As long as you mention all those things about black communities and everything, and a lot of blacks were involved in the civil rights struggles way back then, which I'm one of them because I'm of age where I was at the 1963 march, and because people like Martin Luther King said, an injustice to one is an injustice to all, and that's the same premise we are working on now.
I would strongly disagree with that, sir.
You have your right to.
Strongly disagree with that.
You
I don't
see?
think Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King would actually say that this is a civil right. The issues, I lived in New York City. I grew up in the post-civil rights era. I saw active discrimination. I lived within 2 miles of housing projects where I saw people being discriminated against in the post-1970s, which was a very trying time for African-American communities. Okay? This is not the same thing as what I witnessed in New York City.
I lived in the post-50 areas and the pre-50 era. And let me tell you something. Martin Luther King wouldn't have said that. Well, let me tell you, his wife said it.
No, well, but
And
that's not
guess
Dr.
who
Martin
lived with him
King.
all those years and thought the same?
Well, it's not Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't think he'd say that.
I think he would.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we can disagree with that. Thank you.
Are there, let me just ask if I heard you correctly. Did you say that there are no federal laws that discriminate against homosexuals?
Not that I'm aware of.
What's your consideration of the federal don't ask, don't tell policy in the military?
I am not really familiar with that. I know the policy. I'm not totally familiar with the.
Excuse me.
Excuse
Please
me.
show him those respect
I'm not an
he
attorney.
deserves.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, Mr.
Thank
McCann.
you.
Just please proceed.
I am familiar with the policy that in the military that people are, they don't have to disclose their sexual orientation, and so they don't get thrown out of the military. I believe that's what it is. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a member of the military, so I don't know.
So if I told you that it's actually the policy of the federal government that if you disclose the mere fact that you're gay, the mere existence of your status, that you're gay, you can be discharged from the military for no other reason other than that fact, would that surprise you?
No, it would not.
Do you consider that to be a discriminatory policy?
I think it has to go with the morale of the troops. It has to go with the morale of the military. I think that's a policy that needs to be reviewed, and I think the United States government has taken steps to review that. I believe President Clinton instituted that law or that policy back in the early 90s.
But the question I asked you, I understand it's a policy. The question I asked you is, do you think that that policy has a discriminatory effect on those who are homosexual?
It may, at this point, it may. There are, I think, about 43,000 actively gay members of the military. I think there are some generals that are actually starting to change their minds about that. But I really can't comment on that.
Okay.
I really can't. I don't really have the expertise to make that comment.
Okay. What is your understanding about the Federal Defense of Marriage Act? Do you consider that to be discriminatory?
No, I do not.
And what's your understanding of what that act does?
That act allows I believe allows the states to make its own determination on their own marriage laws. Is that correct?
Okay. Well, if I told you that the Federal Defense of Marriage Act specifically denies all of the rights and benefits that accrue to couples and marriages to anybody other than a man and a woman, including Social Security benefits, immigration rights, all of the rights that the federal government bestows on couples who are married, do you think that that creates a distinction in the governmental treatment of heterosexuals from homosexuals?
No, because the federal government, as far as I understand, actually, states have the rights to make marriage laws. So I believe the states have the rights, and it's a state right. So the federal government is just ensuring what the states have adopted, I believe.
Okay, so would it be your position then that gay couples who are married under Massachusetts laws have all of the rights of marriage under federal law? Is that your understanding?
Not according to today's laws, no.
Okay, because of the impact of the Defense of Marriage Act on the
Well,
federal level?
I think the Massachusetts situation is much different because Massachusetts was handed down by decree of a court. So I don't really, again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to get into legal conversation, but I think what has happened in Massachusetts is an anomaly to states' rights. So a court of 5, I believe it was, made that decision for a population of over 4 million people. I don't think that's fair. For you?
Okay, and I understand that you're not an attorney, but you did say in your testimony rather emphatically that the federal government doesn't discriminate against homosexuals, and I just wanted to explore that a little bit more with you. The other thing that you mentioned was that, if I recall your testimony correctly, was that the issue of marriage rights should be put up for a referendum vote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you name 1 or 2 examples of legislative actions other than marriage in the history of Connecticut, which in your opinion should have been put up to a referendum vote?
Should have or should not have?
Should have.
I think the income tax was brought up. It was before I lived here, but the income tax was brought up for a referendum, wasn't it? Or there was something about the income tax vote. That should have been brought up for referendum for the people of Connecticut to decide, I believe.
And how would you, so I understand that's your position, and I understand you've had an opportunity to run for office a couple of times, but how would you, if you were a legislator, how would you decide on an objective level what issues that you weren't capable of deciding as a legislator and which you would confer to the public to decide?
Well, I can answer that question very clearly. I think when it comes to an emotional issue such as this subject, where it is divisive, the people should have a voice in it. I get concerned when if you want to say the cards are stacked up against you, and this is a body that is not representative really of the people. We have Republicans across the state, we have Democrats, but this is a supermajority in the House and the Senate. So I am not really very comfortable with the idea that the fate of the definition of marriage would be clearly and fairly delegated to the rest of the state. I think a policy of this nature, where it involves everybody, should be decided on a referendum. And I don't see why this Judiciary Committee nor this legislature should be afraid of that. At all.
So if I understood your testimony correctly, the decision in your mind, the decision whether a issue should be put up to a referendum, not that we have the process in Connecticut, but if we did, would be based upon an emotional meter about the insensitivity of the issue? Is that
No, I wouldn't say an emotional. I think it goes far beyond emotions. I think it starts from an emotional point. But there's other things. There's severe ramifications of what we would do here. If you were on this Judiciary Committee, if you're going to redefine the definition of marriage, it has lasting implications across public policy, religious institutions, and even a section of the towns and governments that are inside the state, 169 towns. When it comes to religious liberties, that's a major issue. Look at what happens up in Massachusetts, what Mr. Brown testified about before. The Catholic Conference the Catholic Church in Massachusetts is now out of the adoption business. As a Roman Catholic myself, okay, nobody in my family has ever been adopted, but I know that the Catholic Church has done many, many good things for people. My sister benefited from the Catholic Church. My sister's mentally handicapped. If it wasn't for the Catholic Church, I may not even be sitting here right now because I was born into a Catholic hospital. So my fear would be that these institutions that we look to support, whether it's on religious basis or not, would be attacked like they've been in Massachusetts. I mean, if you look at the situation over Waterbury with Plan B, with public funding versus private funding. I mean, this is something like this Judiciary Committee is going through right now. And I think that's a big issue that people need to be made aware of. So it's not just an emotional issue. It's a public policy and also public funding.
Okay. Well, you and I at least have in common that we were both born in Catholic hospitals and raised as Roman Catholics. Let me ask you though, I mean, in your estimation, then, this issue should be put up to referendum. Would it be fair to say that the death penalty and abortion rights and the governor's income tax increase proposal, all of those issues should be put up to public referendum?
I would say abortion and death penalty probably not, but the income tax, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Garrett Gossian.
Just a quick point on the federal discrimination laws. Connecticut had the foresight to afford protections for gays and lesbians in areas of housing discrimination, employment, and the like. But those protections do not exist in the federal law, as I understand it. So,
As a town councilman in the town of East Haven, I voted on housing protections for gays and lesbians, I guess 3 or 4 times by now.
I'm
So
saying the federal-
I'm very much aware of it.
those protections don't exist in many other states, and they don't exist in federal law, do they not?
I'm not really privy to, I don't know. I mean, I guess not. I don't know. If you're telling me that's what it is, I
I mean,
don't
you
know.
made a statement that the federal government doesn't discriminate.
Well, maybe, let me retract that statement, okay? Maybe I misspoke. I apologize. But I do know that in the state of Connecticut, we are very progressive. I know in the town of East Haven, where I live, we're very progressive in that. So, I don't really understand where your question is coming from, other than
You
the
just
federal.
made a statement that the federal government doesn't discriminate in its law, and Senator McDonald brought
Okay.
up don't ask, don't tell, and I'm telling you in housing and
Okay.
employment, I don't believe there's protection for on the basis of sexual orientation. And a question I've asked some others, do you think that we should, you believe it should go to referendum, you said, you think that the civil rights laws of the South should have gone up for referendum?
Al, I've been waiting for you to ask that question of me. No, I do not believe in that. I don't believe that any of the civil rights movements or any of the civil rights things should have went to referendum. But that was a basis of social, basis of economic, basis of visual discrimination. Visual discrimination. Can you tell me, sir, have you ever seen, or have you seen anybody visually discriminate against somebody who's Irish Catholic? Have you ever seen anybody discriminate against somebody who's African American?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have laws for every single one of those things. Have you? I mean, my other question is to you is that you're saying that gays and lesbians are not treated equally. There's laws in the state of Connecticut that protect them in housing. There's laws that have employment rights as well. So I don't understand why we have to change the definition of marriage to make that equal. I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think it goes
Try to
back-
explain it to me.
It goes back to the first point of your testimony that you, I think it was you. It's been such a long day, but you talked about how,
I'm getting tired myself.
this is the issue. This is the issue where there's discrimination left, and this is why I believe we have to make this step. That's why. It's not. And I believe that American Civil Liberties Union preceded you, and I think they have a pretty good idea what civil rights are. That's what they do for a living. So that's my answer, I guess, to you.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this
The great part
question.
about this is
Although I
we
asked
get
the
to
question.
ask questions.
Although I asked
But let me ask a question.
Well,
Back in the 1950s, did a black man hold a position of a CEO? Would you even think about that? Would a black man or a Spanish person hold the highest position inside of an organization? Probably not, right?
Well,
I can assure you today, sir, in 2000, and I know that for a fact, that many gay and lesbians hold high positions in corporate companies. So that doesn't sound like there's economic discrimination there for me. So
I'm not saying there is, I'm saying there's discrimination in this one narrow area that we're talking about today.
Okay.
That's clear.
And I'm saying to you, I don't believe that this is a discriminatory issue.
Okay, and that's where we disagree.
Senator Gomes.
Did you serve in the military?
No, I did not, sir.
Do you believe "Don't ask, don't tell" it was a proper edict for the government, the Army, or the military to have?
I cannot speak on that because I am not a member of the military. However, I can tell you that in my father, my uncles, and some of my nephews, some of my cousins have served in the military, and when I speak to them, they don't object to homosexuals being in the military.
That's because it was a red herring. It never was a problem.
No, my father served in Korea in World War II, so...
I didn't serve during the war, but I was in Korea. I served from 58 to 63. For the 5 years I was in the Army, I served in personnel. I have never seen an incident of any incident of homosexual people being tried, discharged, and so on and so forth. But if you talk about the federal government does not discriminate, they do discriminate. The Army discriminated. It wasn't against, at that time, there was no need for "Don't ask, don't tell" because they lived in the barracks with us. We knew they were homosexual. They did their job, and everybody was fine. You know who they discriminated against? Pregnant women. Let a whack get pregnant, and she was discharged. And I also remember, because I worked in personnel, under the paragraph number of the discharge, it was SPN, special paragraph number 264. It was embedded in my mind. Those are the discharges that were other than honorable that they give it. So you can't say the federal government doesn't discriminate. They discriminate a lot. And that was a red herring when they did this "Don't ask, don't tell," because there was no need for it. No soldier ever went and complained about another person being a homosexual or whatever. We worked together, we lived together, and if they went into battle, your life depended on them. Like you said, there were 43,000 of them still in there. Guess where some of them are? They're in Iraq.
Okay.
Sitting in a foxhole with somebody.
Thank you, Senator
All right?
Gomes.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything further from members of the committee? I just wanted to follow up one brief thing, Mr. McCann. Representative Lawler told me that you actually do hold, I hope I didn't misstate something. I said you had run for office, and apparently you hold office.
Yes, I do.
What office do you hold?
I am a town councilman in East Haven's 2nd District.
Okay. And in your position as councilman in East Haven, does the town put its budget up for a referendum?
It has referendum power. It can go to referendum.
So do tax increases, do you put that up to referendum or anything?
Well, as a matter of fact, you brought that up. That question actually came up last year with revaluation. Mr. Lawler was actually a major part of that whole process. In your campaign, he actually mentioned it a couple of times to me that by the power of signature and vote, or by signature, there was referendum to stop our revaluation. So when the signatures were brought to the town council made a decision to forego a revaluation, and now we're actually facing the revaluation for this year. So that was a referendum process, and people spoke.
And that's, you have a referenda procedure set out in your charter, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you identify for us anything in the Connecticut Constitution or the Connecticut state statutes which permit for a non-binding referendum?
I would not be able to do so. I don't know Connecticut law that well.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing further, I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Next is Matt Katz, followed by Anita Shepker.